Hi, I'm Alli and welcome to my channel. Today I have 10 fall Dollar Tree DIYs to share with you. It's 5 new and 5 favorites. And these are both fall themed and fall decor trends that I'm absolutely loving this season. So let's get into the first project. I'm starting with a Dollar Tree faux leather purse. You could also pick up the faux leather that is meant to be used with a vinyl cutting machine. That would work great for this project too, but I was loving this kind of beigey tone and the texture of this purse. So what I'm going to do is cut the purse down to size. I wanted this to fit around one of those hurricane vases or votives that Dollar Tree sells, but be about an inch shorter than the height of it. I didn't measure, I just kind of cut and eyeballed it until it was the height that I wanted, and I just marked it all down and cut it until it had 2 separate pieces like this. Then what I did was go on one side with some hot glue and I create a very straight line, well, as straight as it could be with hot glue, and I filled that in and I firmly pressed the 2 pieces together to create this kind of seam or kind of gathering on the side. I thought this would be just a kind of a unique look for this vase that I'm creating. I stuck that votive in just to get an idea of where to close off the other side. I marked that with a marker, as you can see here, and repeated that same thing with the glue. Basically, I've created a sleeve that can go right around that hurricane votive or hurricane vase, and it's very, very simple, just like this. You can obviously leave this as is, but as an extra detail, I wanted it to look like it had studs or something like that on there. So I have these silver nail heads that are from the scrapbooking section at the craft store, or I guess they're brads is technically what they are. And I wanted them to be gold, and I didn't feel like waiting for spray paint to dry, so instead I just gave them a couple coats of gold metallic acrylic paint, really letting it dry in between. Acrylic paint's not the best method for this, I will admit, but it did get the job done. And as an additional detail to create an antique look, I dry brushed on a little bit of some black acrylic paint just to bring out some dimension and detail. Now, since these are brads, the benefit is that instead of having to cut off the backs of them and hot gluing them on, I could just punch them right through the fabric. So I carefully used an X-Acto knife to puncture about 1 inch space between each of where these nail heads are going to be placed. And then I folded the leather fabric over and used the punch holes that I already made to transfer that onto the other side so that these were as evenly spaced out on both sides as possible. And then, of course, the benefit of these being brads is I was able to just poke them through the little puncture holes that were made, and you can see this really coming to life, and I love the detail of this. Of course, you could also maybe use some leather or some twine or raffia or string and lace it around the outside edge. I think that would also look really good, but I do kind of like this high-end look that these create. And all I had to do was flip the vase over and then fold over those little ends of the brads to secure them completely. And then I just styled it up with some dried fall looking eucalyptus leaves. I love a good pumpkin project and I love a good candle project. So I'm going to combine the two using these 3 small pumpkins from Dollar Tree. I first removed the stem, and my vision with these is to make taper candle holders. So you can see me placing that taper candle on the top of the pumpkin and using my craft knife to trace around the base of it. And then all you have to do is use that craft knife to carve around the top, pull that little top piece off, and then dig out all of the styrofoam all the way down to about 3/4 of the way through the pumpkin. This is just so you can make sure you add some weight and stability since these are going to be candle holders. But I just repeated that process with all 3 of them. It's so simple to just kind of carve out that foam and make sure that the candle fits periodically until you get the perfect fit. And that's really all you have to do. But I wanted these to look less vibrant, a little bit more realistic, or at least a little bit more muted. So I took some white chalk paint and some water, mixed it together, and created a whitewash to put all over the pumpkins. I put on a nice thick layer, let it set for a couple seconds, and then went over it with my paper towel to wipe it off, and then I built on a second layer of that whitewash. And I really like that this kind of dulls out or makes the pumpkins look a little bit more pastel and a little bit more fitting for my personal style and taste. And then after that dries, they're ready to be displayed. I love going to Dollar Tree to pick out different jars and glassware. These two were just so cute and perfect for this project. What we're going to be doing is making faux amber glass. So I poured a ton of Mod Podge into this little measuring cup here. I also got that at Dollar Tree, and this Mod Podge was almost empty, and it turned out to be the perfect amount for this project. And so I'm using food coloring to dye the glass here. So I started out with red, and I put in a couple drops of red and then a couple drops of yellow and mixed them up to make orange. Now I added in some more red and orange to deepen the color, but the secret here is to add green to the mix, because adding in the green is going to dull down your colors that you have here and actually make this look a little more brown, which is what we're aiming for because we're going for an amber glass look. And also key with this is to really oversaturate the color. The more food coloring you put in, the more saturated your finished result is going to be with this project. So I just kept adding food coloring, mixing, adding food coloring, mixing, until I got to this final color right here. And as you can see, it's kind of like a pumpkin-y, caramely orange type color, and this color turned out 100% fantastic. So what I did was first pour that mixture into the larger jar here. I put the lid on, and then I just twisted and turned and moved the jar around until it was completely coated all of the sides with that Mod Podge and food coloring mixture. I then repeated that same exact thing using this smaller jar right here, and then I placed them both upside down on a cookie sheet lined with some foil that I put the edges up on to protect the cookie sheet for an hour. After that hour was over, I swapped out to a new piece of foil, flipped the jars over, then I put the jars in the oven and turned the oven on so that the jars would preheat in the oven as well at 200 degrees for 30 minutes. Then you leave the jars sit in the oven until the oven is completely cool. Now, while those jars were cooling in the oven, I wanted to do something really cute for the lids. So I have these two mini pumpkins like you saw earlier in the video. I hot glued them down to the top of the lids and then took them outside and spray painted them with some satin black spray paint. I just am so shocked at how well this amber glass technique turned out, and will definitely be trying it again in a future DIY. A trend that I am loving are the minimal frames look, and I really wanted to try that out for the fall season, but on a DIY Dollar Tree budget. So I picked up two frames. I liked the one as is, but the other I thought just needed a little extra love to fit my personal style. So I spray painted it black, and then I took some Rub and Buff in the color Antique Gold, and I used a foam Dollar Tree foam brush to dab it all over the outside of the frame to create a faux antique look. I don't really like the kind of coppery tone of the Rub and Buff that I was using for this project, but it's just what I had in my stash. It looks nice, just not so nice with the other frame that I'm pairing it with, but nonetheless, that is just a minor detail. Now, to create that minimal frame look, I'm using some white heavy-duty paper. This was drawing paper, but what I would recommend using is a Dollar Tree poster board. And I cut the pieces of paper down to the size of my frames, which was 8 by 10. Then I took my ruler and I found the middle on both sheets of the paper that I'm using to create this faux matte board. And then for the minimal look, you want to take the size of the artwork or the print that you're using and make it smaller. So I'm using 4x6 photos that I had printed out. You could use magazine cuttings, Dollar Tree calendar pages, pictures of greeting cards. You can get prints off Etsy, Pinterest, or whatever. You could draw or paint your own, but I wanted to make this a lot smaller, so I actually reduced the size by 1.5 inches on all sides to create a much smaller image, which will create this really gorgeous high-end minimal look. So I made that smaller one, and then the other one I wanted it to be the full 4x6 photo, so I just cut out my little matte opening at a little bit over 4x6 just so that there was some overlap to lay the photo in. But I just placed the photos in the frame where I wanted them, used some tape to hold them in place, closed the frames back up, and they were ready to be displayed. I'm starting with a Dollar Tree gift box. This is the medium size, and I am painting the entire thing matte black acrylic paint. You could also use spray paint to do this as well. I just went with the paint because it dries a little bit faster. And then I'm going to use some popsicle sticks. I love using these for DIY projects. And I'm marking these each at 2 inches, and I'm going to cut them down at that mark, leaving that scalloped edge because I think that's going to be a really nice detail that the popsicle sticks create. So you see that I'm marking them here. I'm able to get 2 pieces out of 1 popsicle stick. Then I'm using my miter shears, which I got off of Amazon. They are linked in my Amazon store, and I'm cutting them all down to size. And now the cool part about this too is once you cut out the scalloped edges, you are going to be left with that kind of middle section left over. Don't get rid of those, we're going to need them. And as you see, I started marking those all out on additional popsicle sticks, and these are going to make up the bottom of this box, which I'm transforming into a really cool modern looking tray. So once again, I used my miter shears to cut those pieces down. Next, I took some hot glue and I just began adding on all of those pieces that I cut out. You can see what I'm doing right here. Very, very easy. I just filled up all of the sides of the box with the popsicle stick pieces, leaving that scalloped edge along the top for that really lovely detail that it creates. Now I got really lucky, the popsicle stick pieces fit all the way across on the longer sides. However, when I got to the shorter sides, they didn't quite fit. So for that little gap right there, I kind of overlapped one piece on the center on both of the shorter sides. Now what I'm going to do in the bottom of this tray is create a herringbone pattern. You can see the start of it right here. I glued down 2 pieces like that so that they begin to form that herringbone look, and I roughly estimated where the middle of this tray was, but it wasn't quite the middle. But I laid all of those down using some hot glue, and once I got that middle section done, I was able to start filling in and branching out from there. Now if you notice, I do leave some of the areas around the edges plain or blank, I should say, for now, and that's because that's where the miter shears come in, and I was able to switch that to a 45-degree angle and snip off the little excess edges. That'll help this lay perfectly in the inside of the box just by snipping off the corners where needed. Because I painted the box black, I then want to stain all of the wood pieces. You definitely could have stained these prior to adhering them. Not sure why I did it in this order, but I'm using some stain in the color Ebony, which is just a pure black stain, and I just love the kind of modern look this gives because you can still see the wood grain in the popsicle sticks, but it gives you that sleek black modern look. Once the stain completely dried, I gave the entire tray a poly coat with satin finish, and then I used some Dollar Tree faux leather ribbon to add little handles on the sides of the box and some of these brads that you see me use in the video, I cut the tabs off of them and glued those down just to add a little extra nail head trim detail. When I was at Dollar Tree, I found this really cute Monstera leaf sculpture. I love it, so I had to buy it, but I wanted to recreate it for fall as well. So I took some white polymer clay and I rolled it out to the desired size, which is this little Dollar Tree faux leaf right here. And I used it as a stencil for my craft knife to cut all the way around the clay, and I removed the excess pieces. Then using a skewer, I used that to create some of the markings on the leaves to bring in some of the detail and veining. Then I used some aluminum foil to mold and create the shape that I wanted the leaf to have after I baked the polymer clay. I put that stem piece in there because that's going to help give me a place to hold the little stem that holds this leaf sculpture up. And I added these foil pieces to create a little bit of some depth, dimension, and movement with the piece. I then put it in the oven and baked it following the instructions on my clay packaging. While that was baking and cooling, I then took a little mini flower pot, and if you flip it over, you'll notice that a shish kebab skewer fits almost perfectly into the drainage hole on the bottom of the flower pot. So that was going to be the perfect base. I painted the entire thing and my little piece of the skewer with black acrylic paint. Then for my leaf here, I'm using more of that metallic gold acrylic paint you saw me use earlier to paint the entire leaf. Would have been a little bit easier if I would have painted the leaf black first and then put the gold over top, but I wanted to see what it would look like just with the gold paint, and it ended up taking 3 layers to completely cover it this way. But I am very happy with the finish. And as an FYI, you definitely don't want to use spray paint for polymer clay. It will eat at the clay and damage your project. And then finally, I just used some hot glue to assemble everything, and that completed this little mini leaf decorative object. Another trend I have been seeing this year are these brooms that you use kind of as a decorative piece, and I know that around the fall and winter time, Dollar Tree has these little scented brooms. I thought, why not take 2 and combine them together to create my own that will also smell nice? So that's exactly what I did. I removed the top pieces off the brooms so that I'd make it easier to merge them into one. And then what you can see me kind of doing right here is I moved some of the branches out of the way, stuck some hot glue in the middle, and then took a dowel that was a little bit of a thicker dowel from a leftover from a project. And I glued one broom on half the dowel and then the other broom on the other half of the dowel. Then to make it look more finished and less like a witch's broom, which is totally still the vibe since Halloween and fall kind of go together, I added a little twine loop at the top, and then starting at the bottom, I took more of that jute twine and I just tightly wrapped it all the way around the base of the broom like this, all the way up the handle until it was completely covered. And I really like the cohesive look. This kind of gives a primitive antique look, and I really like it. I think it's just fun. It becomes a nice little styling piece on a pegboard or a coat rack, and I love that it's scented because it does bring a nice scent into my home as well. But it's just such an easy project that you can complete in just a matter of minutes. Now let's make a really fun wreath for fall using one of my favorite current home decor trends, which is brass. I just love the look of brass right now, especially for the fall. It just adds a little bit of some sparkle into the space as well as some warmth. So I'm using various bunches of Dollar Tree leaves and cutting them down so they're just smaller picks to make this easier to work with. And then using a gold macrame ring that you can get at the craft store, and I've also seen Dollar Tree is starting to sell them at some of their Dollar Trees. I haven't seen them yet, but they're relatively cheap from the craft store. And I just hot glued the leaves down all the way around the wreath form and just sticking them in wherever I felt like the leaves needed to be, varying their different sizes and shapes and things like that. And as an extra detail, I also went in with some of these little foam berries and stuck those into other spots to also add in some more texture and variety into this wreath. And I actually think this wreath turns out super pretty as is. You could 100% leave it with these beautiful fall colors and it looks great, but I really just wanted to level this up just a little bit by taking it outside and spray painting the entire thing with this gorgeous gold spray paint by Rust-Oleum. I will be sure to link it in the description box, and it took 3 coats to achieve this final look. Dollar Tree always has these cheap foam pumpkins, and the DIY potential of them are absolutely endless. So with that, I removed the stem and then I went outside and gave it some spray paint. The spray paint does eat away at the foam. It's better to probably use acrylic paint for this project. But then I just took my scissors to carve out the top. And then over the summer, I picked up the raffia looking hula skirts. I removed some of the pieces, hot glued them down to the bottom in this kind of cross shape to at least get started. And then what I did was I flipped the pumpkin over and then took those excess strands that you could see here and I stuffed them into the hole that we created in the top of the pumpkin. You do probably want to cut away some of the excess of the raffia strands, and we will be able to use that excess to fill in some of the gaps later. But basically, I just repeated that, building this up all the way around until I got this really cool raffia coated pumpkin. I just love that it's a little bit more unique and textured than just painting the pumpkin or adding ribbon. And as an additional detail, I did take some raffia strands and twist them pretty tightly to create the look of the grooves on the pumpkin, I guess is the best way to describe it. And then for the stem, to keep with that natural look, I had some of these little wood birch pieces or something like that. I picked them up a long time ago at Dollar Tree, and I just stuck that right on the top of the pumpkin where the stem goes. We're taking 3 of these wood Dollar Tree trays and then some wood glue to adhere them all together. I'm also using some Dollar Tree little clamps like these to hold the trays in place while they dry. So basically we're turning these 3 mini trays into one long tray that will be great for a centerpiece. Now to make this look a little bit more high-end and expensive, I'm using a brand new tool, which are my miter shears, to cut down these popsicle sticks that are also from Dollar Tree. I did find this to be a little bit tough because these popsicle sticks were very, very strong, but I eventually found that if you just kind of clamp down with the miter shears on the end that you want to cut, and then quickly snap the popsicle stick upward, you'll get that nice clean cut. So that is just a helpful tip if you purchase these miter shears. I'll also be sure to link them in the description box. So what I did was glue down some little pieces here to hide these seams on both sides of this tray that we are creating, and then just for extra detail, I included one on each end as well. I thought this would just make it turn into a little bit more of a crate type look. And then to hide the little star and handle cutouts on the inside of the tray, I also snipped down some popsicle sticks a little bit smaller and then hot glued them in to fill in these little spots here. Though you won't really see them, I just wanted to do this to make this look nice and clean and professional. Now we're on to the wood staining portion, and I'm of course using my favorite wood stain, which is Early American by Minwax, and it just has the perfect fall, rustic, farmhouse kind of look that we're trying to go for right here with this project. And I was out of my foam brushes that I usually use to apply the stain, so I just used a paper towel, but definitely recommend using a foam brush when applying stain, especially to a project with a lot of nooks and crannies like this one. After that stain completely dried overnight, it was time to move on to the next step, which is adding a little bit of detail by wrapping some jute twine around the handles. I just love this effect. I actually did a DIY tiled tray a while back where I did this on the handles as well, and I just think it looks so much nicer and makes it look a little bit more expensive. Next up, I've picked out these 3 really gorgeous fluted votives from Dollar Tree. They always have some stunning votives, but to make them a bit taller in the tray, I'm using some Dollar Tree Jenga blocks or tumbling tower blocks to make small little bases that the votives will sit on. So I ended up doing stacks with 3 blocks each and 3 stacks high, if that makes any sense. So in total, making a 9-block layered square. And those added just the perfect amount of height that these votives needed to stick out of the tray. Then the next step is pretty easy. I'm just taking a whole bunch of Dollar Tree florals in a color scheme that I really liked. I used my wire cutters to snip them down a little bit smaller, and then just began manipulating the stems a bit and just placing in the leaves and all of the little pieces exactly how I wanted. It did take a little bit of just some playing around with the florals to get the right arrangement that I liked, and I did try to kind of spread out and divide the leaves by coloring as best I could between each of the trays that formed this bigger tray. And I also found too, with some Dollar Tree florals like these faux, I think these are faux mums or something like that, you could actually take 2 of them and hot glue them together to make a bigger flower that looks just so much better than the single flower stem that you get when you buy it from Dollar Tree. And I just filled in with some of these beautiful orange looking flowers. And then also went in with some of these smaller little daisy type flowers in both the cream color and the yellow color to add some extra pops and variation. And as a final detail, I added in some small little berries along with these tiny little cream pumpkins. I added 3 votive candles from Dollar Tree, and that completes this gorgeous high-end looking centerpiece. If you want to see even more fall DIY inspiration, I have linked my playlist on the screen here and another video that you might also want to check out. Thanks so much for watching, stay crafty, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!